Alright, this week I guess we're exploring the sort of Oscar theme a little bit because we've got, or potential Oscars, where we've got a musical biopic and a showy performance from a veteran actress that has a lot of buzz, and, another Gerard Butler piece of shit as well. So maybe one doesn't really fit with the others, but it'll be in between, so we'll try to bounce back. But obviously, we're gonna start with Bohemian Rhapsody. I know a lot of people were kind of after a while turning their nose up at this movie a little bit for a number of reasons. Because apparently there was obviously the whole Sacha Baron Cohen thing, which pretty much everybody wanted, where he was gonna make it like R-rated and go not really shy away from anything whatsoever. But then there was Brian May and Roger Taylor were heavily involved and apparently wanted it to be more. There was some sort of vague area there where it was like they wanted it to practically be PG or something and be much more about them than Freddie Mercury alone. I'm not really sure since this movie is not that. I'm not really sure if that was like misinformation or something that changed over time or what. But and then you add all this drama on top of the fact that Bryan Singer was the director, and not only does he have his own issues, I guess we'll say, but he eventually had to be fired because he was basically neglecting the whole project and not showing up and clashing with just about everybody. Just apparently it sounds like being an all-around douchebag, and so they brought in Dexter Fletcher to finish it off. And it was one of those cases of a lot of people had assumed when that news broke that it was going to be like Dexter Fletcher's movie, who had recently done Eddie the Eagle, and as an actor in a bunch of things. But then it ended up being that it was more like a sort of Joss Whedon and Justice League sort of thing, where he pretty much just had to come in and finish it, more or less. So Singer is still the credited director, with Dexter Fletcher getting the executive producer credit. A whole lot. So it just basically seemed from the get-go that this was going to be some gigantic mess based on all of that. And so I don't know if it depends on... Because there seems to be kind of a middle ground here. Some people seem to be falling in love with it, and some people are, like, tearing it apart, mainly for the whole historical accuracy thing. As you know, with me, it's like... People really should be aware of the biopic at this point that comes out, and it's like... If you see enough of these, I don't know what you expect anymore. I do not go into movies like this expecting a documentary at all. And it's like, it's so clear that there's going to be plenty of liberties taken. They're going to have to move some things around or take some stuff out or put some stuff in that makes it more dramatic and movie-like and all that. And it's like, it still baffles me that people just aren't used to that yet. And they come out saying... the historical accuracies are all over the place, as if you didn't fucking expect that, because every goddamn biopic does that, but you'll always have that reaction. So, like I said, I do think there is a reason documentaries exist, because they are a totally different entity than the, Hollywoodized, portrayal of a famous person or famous people. So, I feel like if you can find that line, that... you can pretty much just take it as it comes, and you can still be incredibly critical of it depending on how it comes. But so yeah, but there were quite a few things sort of negative things I was expecting from this movie that didn't happen, which is a really good start. Because I kind of figured it would be one of those movies where you would get, because the great thing about this, and especially being about Queen, is the fact that when you get these musical biopics, particularly about certain artists or bands, the scenes that you, like, really crave and, like, really wait for and, like, spend the whole movie waiting for are watching your favorite songs from them being created. But the thing is they had so many songs that this movie is full of those scenes, of them putting the songs together. And it's like, just when you think, it's... You're waiting for the Bohemian Rhapsody scene, and then once that's passed, it's the We Will Rock You scene, and the Love of My Life scene, and so on. Obviously not in that order, but you get it. And I was a little afraid at first it was going to be sort of like Jersey Boys, when it was like we had those really contrived scenes where it'd just be these really ridiculous ways. It'd be like some random thing would happen, and they'd just be like, oh, that gives me the idea for a song, and then the next scene is just the song. I was kind of half expecting that, but thankfully that's not really the way it is. Some of the songs may be a bit abruptly introduced, but for the most part, we get enough of those creation scenes that really make it worthwhile and really make you sort of crave the next one like it for whichever song is going to come next. And so, with that being so consistent throughout the movie, that in itself is enough to be really engaging, given that the movie is like 2 hours and 15 minutes. And it does feel like really long. Like, I don't know what exactly was going on with the pacing here. I think it's the fact that like the first hour or so is like they're really rushing to put a lot of different things in like at once. Like they get famous very very fast, as we see in the movie. Like, to the point though is like the way it's presented. Like, it's presented in a gradual fashion, but at the same time, not a lot of time is passing movie wise. So it's like by the time they get to a certain point, you probably think we're heading into like, you know, all the conflict or something big's gonna happen or all that, and it's like it's barely in. It's like maybe 40 minutes in or something. So that might do it in a little bit. And depending on how they, you know, jump around or exactly what they're gonna show and what they're not. Obviously, they're wondering with like the PG-13 rating. A lot of people were thinking everything was either going to be watered down or taken out entirely, like how his sexuality was going to be approached story-wise. And they don't... I could see people being a bit underwhelmed by this if that was something they were really interested in, because it's like... I mean, yeah, they technically didn't shy away from it because it's there, but it still feels like... And it doesn't even necessarily feel like it's, you know, brought down for a smaller rating. It just feels like there's like a sort of distance there, even though it's apparent and it's there in the story. It has plenty to do with the story itself, but still, it just sort of, there's like sort of a distance to it. And it's like if you're expecting to see that as up close as we do the like the music aspect of it, it's, yeah, like I said, it's there, but it's not there, if that's if that's what you're looking for. Every now and then it did have a time where I was a little concerned that it might be sort of that thing I was talking about with Jersey Boys, but in a different sense. Like, I only learned like a couple of days ago that Mike Myers was in this as basically the dude that will make or break them in regards to their fame and how they play on the radio. So they introduce Bohemian Rhapsody to him. And in your head, you're going like, oh, Wayne's World, we get it. That's great. And it's like, it's a nice little casting choice there, with that irony and everything. But I think you're going just a little too far with the having Mike Myers say people won't be headbanging in their cars to Bohemian Rhapsody. That's just fucking dumb. Like, it's, like, if there's one thing that's gonna like totally take you out of this, it's not, you know, in any of that particular stuff. It's not like whether it's the accuracy or not, just stuff like that where it's like that in a musical biopic especially, it just seems like such an in-your-face reference that it's like it just really doesn't belong at all. It's like it was. I mean, I don't mind that they cast Myers, but even that in itself is sort of like, okay, but it's like. It also almost feels like there's like a lack of confidence in your own movie because you want to get a rise out of people by reminding them that Wayne's World exists, and it's like, couldn't you get that rise out of them doing your own thing and making, you know, other things, but whatever. But there are still plenty of great things here. Obviously, I haven't even said his name yet. What Rami Malek is doing here is like... Because obviously I've had problems before with biopics where it basically just feels like imitation, but I mean this is like, this goes really beyond imitation. This is like insane, especially if you like watch interviews with him or have seen him in other stuff. It's like, I would have probably never suspected this. I remember when he was like one of the dudes in the elevator in The Master, or one of Aaron Paul's buddies in Need for Speed. Or he was randomly in Spike Lee's Old Boy for like 10 seconds. And it's like, I never would have imagined, especially so soon, that we would see this guy do something like this. Especially with people finding it so hard to get Sacha Baron Cohen out of their minds once that was planted. But this is like, yeah, like it's because the thing is not only can he do, you know, the stage presence, and I heard him recently talking about the idea that he really tried to embrace the spontaneity too. Like when he would go on stage, they were, I guess the original idea was to like sort of choreograph it. But it basically comes down to whenever Mercury would go out there, it would be like just totally spontaneous whatever he would do. So that's what they tried to do more or less. And it's yeah, it's insane. But there's also those plenty of those small moments too. One of my favorites is when he's alone and he's sort of creating Bohemian Rhapsody from the very start, and it's like it surprises him to hear that come out of himself, and you see that in his expression, and that's just a really great moment, one of many with him. And then that follows up with the whole, like I said, the scene where just watching the collaboration of watching that song come together. That could have been the whole damn movie. I think people would have been pleased. The crowd I was with, which was a lot of people, really liked the Rooster transition as well. But so, and then the whole thing that might seem a bit in your face, like some of the things that are, like the contrast. It's really an awesome transition though. When Bohemian Rhapsody makes it to the radio and to critics and all that, and you see the all the how like panned they got and how much people just hated it, called them like a Zeppelin rip off, and did all that. Said it was too long and too pompous and all that, and then it goes right into them performing it in this really big stadium with the entire crowd singing it with them. And it's like, that might seem a bit in your face on paper, or if you just describe it, but the execution is fucking beautiful. And then there's really that crowd interaction too. They bring up a number of times. There's the one really good scene also. It eventually goes into a conflict, but it's a really good start of the scene when obviously he wrote "Love of My Life" for his girlfriend at the time, and they're watching on TV where an entire like crowd is singing it with him, and he says like that's thousands of people singing to you, and it's like that's really good stuff, and really great for the characters too. But the thing here is that my notes got a little sloppy at the end here. I have no idea what they say. But and really the relationship between him and his girlfriend too is something that kind of seems like you imagine it's something that's probably going to be underdeveloped, especially with all this different stuff going on, and it may seem a little less important, but they do really like show just how much of an impact she had, and the way that not just, you know, the song and all that, but like the scenes like when he calls her from across the way, and it's like it really adds something to like the character and the struggle and basically hanging on to the things that he like really does care about, and the thing, and instead while he's going more towards those things that seem to be sort of luring him in with how they look on the outside, but it just makes him vacant in here, and it's in the music he seems to get less passionate about. So that's the thing though, is that we've got that kind of stuff, and we've got, you know, the scene where they break up and he tries the solo thing and he has to ask for forgiveness and all that. And it's like, I think the thing here that's probably holding a lot of people back, the people that don't like it, or, you know, like the critics aren't particularly taking to it either. And sure, apart from the inaccuracies where some things have to be moved around, I think his AIDS diagnosis is mentioned like much earlier than it actually happened. But once again, just for the dramatic effect though, I mean, it really does add to that scene, even if in real life that wasn't quite there at the time. But it really does have the I lost where I was going with that. So but oh yeah, but the thing is that I think the biopic cliches on top of that are kind of what's probably bringing people down. Like, it's very easy to look at a movie like this and just see all the routine beats and all that, and you're like, yeah, we get it, we've seen this before, it doesn't feel different at all. And they're definitely there, and you can definitely, you know, point them out. But I do think like the really good stuff outweighs that, and I'm one of the first people that'll say if there's like something that's way too overly cliche or too, you know, familiar, that it can just kill anything that's, you know, it can just really drown the good stuff with just like oh god, we've seen this before, but they really do find a way to, when they go big, it pays off in ways that completely overshadow some of the stuff that stands out as not as great. And then, lastly, and the people that love this movie may just be coming off of a high, because it's one of those movies where they could be coming off a high because of the ending itself, and where like they're going to associate the movie more with the ending, or because it's the fresher aspect of the movie to them as they're leaving. It could be influencing their entire opinion of the movie. But with that said, that's those movies, much like biopics, where it's like you kind of know where the story's going, but you kind of have in the back of your head, like, wouldn't it be really good for this movie? Like, wouldn't it be like the absolute payoff if this particular moment was the end? And usually when you think that, it's not. And it's like they sort of drop the ball, and it's like they don't go in that, really great direction they could have. Well, that actually happened this time. I was kind of thinking, like, wouldn't it be amazing? This was before I went into the movie, and before they built up in the opening credit sequence that we would be coming back around, where it was like, can you imagine if the Live Aid performance was the climax? But not only that, but they, like, recreated it almost entirely. And it's like, holy fucking shit, they did that. and it's just as amazing as you probably would expect. And yeah, I mean, maybe there's like they're cutting maybe a little too much to things that are outside of this performance, but it's a big ass, grand ass finale to this movie. And like I said, because it was what was it, like 6 or so years before he died. And so it was like they could have, taken it all the way to that and had, the Live Aid thing be like the middle or like the end of the middle or something. But to just stop it there is kind of just perfect, really. It's like the text will tell you what it needs to and all that. I know sometimes I get mad at the text for doing a little too much of the work, but I think this was pretty much exactly where it needed to stop to end on that grand note. So that was very satisfying, but yeah, it is like a cliche biopic at heart. It really is. But when you've got like Rami Malek and you've got all the music scenes and that ending, and some of that emotion really comes through also. That's, I mean, yeah, that's probably all I could have asked for, really. So, but people will have varying reactions to it, but that's where I stand. So this, we're gonna go on to Hunter Killer, the new generic-ass Gerard Butler movie that nobody's gonna see. I, I don't even have a whole lot to say about this. Like, I almost kind of just didn't do this movie. But, because the thing here is that, I mean, I guess I'm biased going in, and I was being unfair going in, because I have certainly liked Gerard Butler in the past, and some of his movies in the past. And sometimes he can do his best to elevate shitty movies by like actually giving it his all. But then there's times like this where we're kind of in that. Obviously, just Geostorm was just last year, and we saw the absolute. I can't even say disaster. Like, disaster is what we wanted Geostorm to be. It wasn't even that. It was just boring ass nothingness. And this is pretty much kind of falls in that category too. But another reason I probably win this movie a bit unfairly is this just is not my genre. The submarine movie is really not my thing. Like, I'll take, like, The Hunt for Red October, obviously everybody loves. There's Das Boot, of course. I remember liking U-571. I don't remember much about it, except that I seem to really like it. But all the others just don't. I don't even care for Crimson Tide, really. So, like, this, really, overall, this is just not my thing. But I figure, we'll take a look anyway. But it is one of those things where, like, you see the poster, and you see Gerard Butler, and you see Gary Oldman with a stupid haircut, and you're like... And this was shot, like, a long time ago. This was before Oldman's Oscar win, actually. I think it was shot before Darkest Hour even came out. And the thing here is you look at that poster, and you're like, oh, well, obviously that's going to be released at the end of in the month in a dead week, and it's going to make about $10 and all that. I think it was like at the number 5 slot or something, which is a lot better than I would have anticipated, but even so, I think it's already down to like 2 showtimes at my So after this week, so but anyway, still, it's like maybe there's something here. Maybe there's something almost sort of like, campy about it or something like guilty pleasure quality or something. Maybe. But not really that either. We're introduced to Butler's character, and they try for like a split second to give him some sort of personality or backstory, because we've got like we keep getting reminded of this incident in his career that like something went horribly wrong or something. And then when we first see him, he's out hunting and he goes to kill a deer, but when he like sees the deer family next to the deer, it's like, oh, he can't bring himself to do it. It's like, okay, so is that his personality? And it's like, I don't know, because none of this really comes back. Because his job is to basically stand at a post in a submarine and just yell military things, or yell submarine things, or whatever the hell. Basically give the audience... he basically has to yell things in a certain sort of military lingo that may make sense to certain people, but for a wide audience, it's not going to. It just gives them the illusion that something's happening. That's pretty much what a large portion of the movie is. It's 2 hours, by the way. Like a full 2 hours. Not like an hour, like some hour 50 bullshit. A full 2 hours in like 1 minute. Which is a lot of time for a movie like this that doesn't really have a whole lot to do. Oh, but it'll make you think it does. It really, really will, because it's got a shitload of plots. Because we've got the whole Butler thing where they're investigating that submarine that disappeared, and he's brought into this whole thing even after the incident in his past. There's the Russian president being like taken hostage. There's the SEAL team that like comes down, like skydives out, and then is like there's like the Russian base and all that. And basically all of this is going to somehow converge potentially into World War III unless they do something, or many things. And the movie will cut back and forth endlessly between these things, and like I said, give you the idea that things might be happening, but not really. The characters just sort of stand around. Sometimes they yell at each other. Sometimes they, wait in anticipation for something that may or may not happen, and ultimately it obviously won't, because suspense, We'll have Gary Oldman yelling, because obviously that's the only reason Gary Oldman was cast, was it's like, we need to make this movie feel like there's an urgency, and we also need to make people feel like there's real acting in it. Let's just get Gary Oldman to yell. It doesn't matter what the fuck he's yelling. As long as Gary Oldman is yelling, people will think they're watching something profound. A lot of the time they're not. So, and we also have Michael Nyqvist, who is the Russian captain, who you remember from the original Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and he was the bad guy in John Wick. He unfortunately died of lung cancer like a year and a half ago, which tells you how long ago this was shot. And this is kind of a really unfortunate note to go out on, because he had some, really good stuff on his resume, but, so yeah, this is basically what we get. And then as it goes on, like, after a while, after it's the whole, Common walking around, saying things, Linda Cardellini coming in, giving the illusion that she's important, but she's kind of not really, and cutting back and forth between, like, war rooms and submarines and Navy SEALs and all that, and it's like, eventually they just kind of start shooting each other, there's headshots, there's explosions, and it's like, so much kind of happens in the second half with all the explosions and the gunfire and all that. It's like, in comparison to the nothingness that was the first hour, people will probably think this is super duper exciting. But it's just as equally pointless as all the other shit that came before it. Just a bunch of fucking noise while people go through these contrived plots until eventually we get the whole I respect you and I respect you ending. And there's just nothing here. We get stuff like, and it's one of those cases too where you can kind of tell pretty quickly that the action is going to not be, up to par with really the norm, let alone something better. Where it's like there's this training sequence where it's like this poorly edited mess with these ridiculous camera angles. The dude's got like the camera attached to him as he runs, but we get like fraction of a second of cuts of that throughout this scene. If you look forward to that kind of thing, then there you go. It basically just looked like one of those, like those, recruitment commercials that are like way over the top and have like American music and shit, Hummers ramping in the mud and shit. It's basically that. And trying somewhat to insert a story into it, but it just feels all over the damn place. And yeah, I mean, maybe it's exactly what you're expecting, but it's like, maybe some people look at it and say like, oh, well, it's just dumb fun, but it's like, it's way too fucking boring to be any kind of damn fun at all whatsoever. But, as I said, maybe because it's just not my thing, particularly the whole subgenre, even though that's not like the whole thing, because there's still all that other shit going on, like it's subplots galore, that really eventually are sort of one plot, but it just feels way too all over the damn place. So just I don't care about that movie. Like I don't even know why I even went through this, but why I even talked about it. But there it is. So we're gonna end on the wife for something different, I guess. And as I talked about in the Oscar videos, I really wasn't, despite the fact that Glenn Close is like at the top of like a bunch of prediction lists for Best Actress, like to win. This movie I felt was like so incredibly off the radar. Like I said, I saw like one interview that Glenn Close did and one interview that Christian Slater did, and that's all I knew about this movie. That was like 2 months ago. And then I'm just now coming across it, and it was more than I was kind of expecting, but it is obviously a very small movie with a very limited cast. You've got her husband Jonathan Pryce and their son Max Irons. They've got a daughter, but the movie doesn't seem to care very much. Like she's pregnant with their grandchild, and that's sort of a driving force here, but they barely paid any mind. And he's being more or less stalked by Christian Slater as he has been called to win the Nobel Prize and accepted. And as they're flying out there, he's being stalked by Christian Slater, who is like obsessed with writing his biography. But you can just kind of tell that Slater's playing one of those guys. It's sort of like there's like a certain sleazy side to what he does. So he's basically setting out to make like a hit piece, more or less. And that's about it in regards to setup. Obviously, a lot of it is the back and forth between Jonathan Pryce and Glenn Close and their relationship and all that, and the sort of back and forth that they have. But the thing here is, and the performances obviously are what the standout of the movie. Like apparently, a lot of people are underwhelmed by the movie itself, and specifically want to praise the performances, particularly Glenn Close. But the thing about that is, I do think, in a weird twist, considering what the movie's about, Jonathan Pryce is getting a bit overshadowed by this. I do think both of them do go very well together. There is, but the thing about Close, though, is that she's basically got to give two performances, like two different performances as it goes. But it all kind of flows into one gradually, because at the start, obviously, they're the married couple, but of course, he's, winning the prize. But we can sense that there's, like, a distance, and she feels almost like a resentment for his success, for reasons that apparently, the reveal in this movie, like where it's headed, is apparently some big surprise that most people don't know about, and the marketing is kind of kept shrouded. But the interesting thing, I don't think this affected how I saw the movie or anything, but it's like, I knew where it was going, but I kind of thought, like, we were supposed to? It's like, I kind of was under the impression that was, like, the plot. But no, it's like a reveal very late, so I guess I won't say what that is, but the thing here is, as it goes on, she obviously, because we keep getting, there's flashbacks to when they first met and their relationship as it got to this point, but it is one of those movies where it's like, not only are just Close and Price doing a good enough job as is, but it's just one of those movies where, like, the second you see it flashback, you're like, oh, this. It's like, how many times are they going to do this? And it's like, this will clearly be the slow parts of this. And it's her, I mean, maybe there's something there because Glenn Close's actual daughter is playing the young version of her. But there's really not there is like sort of a disconnect between the present and the past here, and because the flashback scenes just aren't doing it. Um, but the thing about closest thing here is as it goes on, there's like it's sort of building up to like imagine her performance starts off as like pop rocks like the candy, and it's going to eventually end in a nuclear explosion is basically the progression we have, because the thing here is she has to do a lot with expression because it's so like contained, and she's got like she'll say exactly what she's feeling or how she feels towards Price or the situation itself with just like one expression, or like just any kind of emotion without really saying anything. And then as it goes on, it gets more and more, almost turns into more of a battle between them until she eventually gets to do the big showy thing. And it may be like, I could see some people not taking to this performance because it's like, at first it almost feels like it's not showy enough, but then when it gets bigger, it might be maybe seen as too showy. But I do think there's enough of a progression here that she finds. It may be like when she starts to the yelling point, it might seem a bit abrupt, and it's like maybe there's a little less transition there than it seems. But overall, she does have like a huge control over the character and the way she's able to basically go from being in the background. And this is like sort of self-referential for her. Like she knows she's seen as the wife in the background that's like long suffering while he does his thing. And then as this is sort of slowly coming out as these events progress, eventually we're gonna get a lot of Oscar clips. Is what it is. Like every scene almost. If like you take out the profanity, of course. Like almost every scene in like the last act or so is an Oscar clip for just about anybody. Um, and obviously, like I said, Price is always kind of there to kind of bounce off of her also. They bounce off of each other. And there's a really good... Because he's obviously got a bit of a... Sort of a temperament issue that we learn throughout, where he can be seeming like, the friendliest, most approachable guy ever. But then you get stuff where, like when they're fighting, and it's starting to get out of control in regards to the volume. And she accuses him of like trying, or actually banging this photographer that's following him around. And this comment makes him blow up with one line that is like monstrous. And then the very next line he says with hardly a beat is like back in his normal voice. And it's like stuff like that is like, you can really sense the control he has on this character and the emotion in it, which is really great. And then you've got, and you've also got some sort of, I guess, somewhere in between real life and the movie thing with stuff like, there's, they have, obviously their son is also trying to be a writer, and he's sort of in Price's shadow. And it's like, this is a guy that has a really famous dad, and he's like living in his shadow, doing the same thing that he does, but his dad is like this really, really renowned, great, consider that at what he does, and the kid's kind of struggling, and it's like this kid's played by Max Irons. It's like if you don't know exactly who he is, the last name means what you think it means. So it's like there's kind of a little something there, even if that's. I mean, maybe he doesn't actually feel that way towards his dad, but there still kind of lends a little bit of reality into this character also. So not that Max Irons is the best actor or anything, but it's just sort of an interesting piece of casting given the kind of part that he's playing. And speaking of the casting, we also have Christian Slater. Obviously, I have time and time again talked about how Christian Slater has not lately been getting the parts he deserves, apart from Mr. Robot. Which I have not watched, but obviously he's acclaimed for it. And this part does suit him very well. And because the thing about it is, I talked about how he's basically the, sleazy biographer and all that, and it's like he's always just sort of lurking around, just waiting for his chance to pounce at the right time and get some information that maybe shouldn't be given to him. And it's like he just lingers like the devil. There's this shot that I loved where Max Irons is the next person he's going to pounce on to try to get information. And the way they do this is he's sitting at like this bar, and the camera kind of pans a little bit to where there's an open space to his left. And he's like, could I? They asked him what he needs, and he's like, could I get a cigarette? And Slater just like slithers right into that open shot with a cigarette ready, and it's like he's the fucking devil. And I feel like they could have done more with that character, and the more he kind of intrudes on them. Um, but still, there is still plenty there. It is the movie does open up a lot of those spots where you're kind of like they could have maybe done more with this or more with this as opposed to what they end up going with. But maybe less scenes of Price walking around, sort of like schmoozing and all that. But there are some other things they tackle here, like the whole. There's something with both the young version of Glenn Close's character and the Max Irons character where it's like how well they portray like the pain of hearing your work criticized. Like when she first meets Jonathan Pryce's character in the flashback, and the scenes where Irons is basically trying to get Price to basically approve his work or at least say that it's good. But obviously, the Price is the kind of character where there's always just going to be that but at the end of the compliment. So they do. I do like the way they showed that off, but the main thing here though is that it like I said, it feels like they could be doing more with certain aspects, and those flashbacks are so damn weak. It's like anything that's established in those flashbacks could have easily been established in the scenes between Price and Close, just talking. Even if it was subtly done, they could have easily gotten the point across without all that. And also, the performances are also lacking quite a bit. Like, being Glenn Close's daughter doesn't necessarily automatically give you a presence, or especially not that kind of presence. And the guy playing young Price, especially, is just like, it's just, yeah, we're going back and forth between Oscar movie and the fucking CW, and it doesn't really mesh very well. But there's plenty of good stuff in it, and I do see where the close praise is coming from. But I do think that there's things in the movie that are equally just as good. So, yeah. So there's that. So next week is I don't quite know, but because it's probably only going to be I'm hoping it's like Beautiful Boy or something, but it might be The Girl in the Spider's Web or Overlord. I think also comes out. With plans the way they are, I'll have to choose one at the time, but I'll probably see the others in the middle of the week later. And I'll figure out where it goes from there. So that's what this is. We've got another Blunt thing coming tomorrow, and then a Versus after that, and basically back into the normal swing after the whole Halloween thing. So yeah, that's what we're looking at. So until all that stuff, that's it.